hasn't been found by the man. And the good news is, this man found assurance in life and love, not after his ugliness. Do you hear me? Not after his ugliness. In his ugliness. In it. Right in the middle of it. Someone said, not to me. Not to me are you ugly. To me, you're warm and kind and good and wanting so much more than is there. And you, and me, in our ugliness. Here he comes. And he says things and we respond, and he says more and we respond, and he leans over and he says to us, why, you're not a perfect person. And we say, oh no? Oh. I almost thought I was. So many people seem to say that. My experience in childhood, things that have gone on seem to say that. And he says, oh no. No, you're mine. And you're gorgeous. That's why we trust him. Because he will not be put off. Not by you, me, or anybody else. Not by our ugliness, and not even by our niceness. He comes to us to redeem us. And that's why we trust him. That's why we believe in him. And we can help you in any way to move up into the Christ. Let us do it, will you please, while we stand and sing. I'm a little old weak man. See, that song we just sang is one of those really touching things. It's a plea for just deep intimacy. It's got all that tactile or tactile stuff in there. Touch me and hold me. And we're in such need of those things. But the text, which is at the head of it, is an entirely different text. It's a blistering, demanding text. And he says, I want to know him and the power of his resurrection. The whole section is one where he is willing not only to give up all that was his, but he says, I want to know the fellowship of his sufferings. I'm not saying we shouldn't sing this. I'm pleased that we sing this. I'm just wanting to lead into what I intended to say. Nobody knows the power of his resurrection. Not really will. Until they're delivered over into what Paul talks about there in Philippians chapters 2 and 3 and in 2 Corinthians, delivered over to the death sentence. When nothing looks right, when the world is turned upside down, everything is screwed up, life seems to be gone, there's nothing worth living for, and then the Christ comes, and the world changes, and you experience the resurrection power, even here in this life, don't you see? Now, later on, we'll experience it fully. But Paul's deep desire, in Philippians, the whole book, but in 2 and 3 in particular, his deep desire is to give himself to God so that he enters into the sufferings of Christ at a deeper level, and having entered into life with God at that deeper level, he then knows the power of the resurrection, and God then. I I do think, and this is going to, I'm saying this like it's profound, everybody knows this, I'm just repeating the obvious. I really do think when we realize how dumb we are, we're more driven to dependence on God, and the safest place in the world is with Him. And now everybody knows that. Somehow or another it struck me as a wonderful thing to say. And then when I started to say it, I realized even the person in the room didn't know it. The children in the nursery know it, you know. So it's wonderful to learn I'm not in control of this thing. He's in control of it. Because there is in me, and I suspect in the bulk of us, this sense of guilt that really doesn't belong there. If we didn't feel we had so much power, and therefore had control, and therefore weren't running the show well, we would have less guilt. It's only when you think you have control and think you ought to be shaping everything the way it ought to be, it's only when you have that that you feel guilty about it not going well. Did that come out right? What I meant to say, if I didn't come out right, was this. If I think I'm in control, and it just doesn't work right, then I take responsibility on myself and feel guilty about it not working very well. But if I do become convinced I really don't have the power to control things, that in the end, if He will not, through me or through somebody else, control it, there's nothing I can do about it. And at least it should ease any guilt feelings of mine. In the end, our bottom line, our last line of defense is that God is faithful and capable of running the show for us. And that I find consoling. When I first came into this building, this is a huge place. I meet with a group, maximum 40, and it's about the size of those two front pews, you know. And so when you come in here, this is a huge building that looks new. And when I thought about it, I thought then of a story that Willard Tate told. He said they built a new building, and somebody thought that they ought to put a sign up on all the various places where they met. Like in the area where the ladies met for their Bible studies, they had something like, husbands, love your wives, you know, in a text from Ephesians chapter 5, and wives do this, that, and the other. And then when he went to the men's Bible study, they had something from 2 Timothy 2, something like, study to show yourself approved. And he went to the different places. And when he went to the kitchen, they had something up there, then, you know, that God has given these things, 1 Timothy chapter 4, that to be received with thanksgiving of them that know the truth. And they got to the nursery, and nobody, nobody, oh, I love this. Nobody knew what to put on that thing. And they finally come up with this, a piece from 1 Corinthians 15. We shall not all sleep, but we'll all be changed. What? Don't you love that? He tells it better, but I told you how he told it. See, I love this. I love doing what we're now doing. And the smaller the group, somehow or another, the more intimate. I wish more people were here, of course. But the smaller the group, the more intimate it seems. And that makes me feel better, because I'm one of those who's scared witless and nervous about everything. But the smaller the group, somehow the failure doesn't seem so big if you fail. You know what I mean? I want to say some things about Job. I want to say that just a number of plain statements, and then you take them in there and work with them and do what you think you should with them. Job's blessing, his rich blessing, was the will of God. It was the will of God. Number two, Job's trouble, his hard times, they were also the will of God. And I want to say that in Job's case, God targeted the little man. Now, I have no reason to believe that everyone who becomes ill has been targeted by God. I'm not suggesting that. But I am suggesting that God has done, and if he sees fit, he will target individuals. Now, you and I know enough about God by now through Jesus Christ to know that if he ends up targeting an individual, gives them pain or whatever else it is that he brings their way, it's never malicious. It's never for any other reason than not only their good ultimately, but the good of the purposes that, God has in mind. And when God has called you and me into Jesus Christ, he takes us when we were dead, makes us alive. When we had no hope, he gives us hope. When nobody else wanted us, if that's the case, you see, he brings us into his family and gives us a place. When we have nothing and no inheritance up ahead, he gives us an inheritance that's incorruptible, undefiled, that fades not away. And no matter what the world in general would think of us, he thinks, 1 Peter 2, he thinks we're precious. And all of that is true of us. And if then God comes to us saying, I want you to suffer for me, it isn't for us to debate with him. We can't say, oh, I love it that you made me alive. I love it that you forgave my sins. I love it that you've given me this hope. I love that I know where I'm going. I know that I've got all of this inheritance, but I don't want you to be asking me to do anything serious for you. We can't negotiate with him. We are the elect of God, and should it be that God targets specific ones among us for a specifically tough job, if that's the case, then it's for us to say, ooh, don't like that. But Peter will again and again speak in this fashion. If it's the will of God that you suffer, commit yourself to a Creator who's faithful. And he will say that a number of times throughout the Scriptures. 1 Peter, I mean. So, need to say this also, that suffering and death and sin are laid at the feet of Satan, but not that he has the power to target people and beat them up just at will when he sees fit to. But because he is the one who seduced the lady, and the man with his eyes wide open walked into it and rejected God, and it is God who then brought the curse on the world, on the creation in its entirety, and on the human race. Now see, that's a risky thing to say, because people could get mad at God. But I'm one of those who thinks you and I need to look all the evil that's in the world, all the pain and calamity that's in the world, look and say, I need to see God in there, not after it, in it, in the middle of it. For we are people who have said yes to a crucified and risen Lord. And when we look at that, what happened back in Jerusalem on those days, if we looked at it from a merely human angle, we would have said the only thing that's there is injustice, wickedness, brutality, evil, sin, and anything else you want to say. But you and I know, because we know the script, that right in the middle of it, using the wickedness, even provoking the wickedness in already wicked people, the Lord was working redemption for the world. Acts 2:23, you, by lawless or wicked hands, have taken him and crucified him. But that's the second half of the passage. The first half of the passage says, according to the determinate counsel and foreknowledge of God, you, by wicked hands, have crucified and slain. So what we mustn't do, and I think for our own benefit, for our own strength, and to tell the world, this place is not chaotic. It looks chaotic. Things look like they're not working at all, and how do you explain this? And there are things that we can't get a handle on. But we need to be telling the world that in the middle of all of this wickedness, in the middle of the calamity, God is active, not just after it, in it and through it, don't you see? Now, the Satan, to him is attributed all kinds of wicked things. And that's because he is involved in it all. He is opposed to God. He is opposed to God's purposes. And so it isn't surprising that as we go through the scriptures, we find the Satan brought in. A woman is bent double for 18 years, and the Christ said, the Satan bound her for 18 years. Text like that you know. But that doesn't mean he's a free agent. Not at all. He's God's message boy in the end. And in a conversation with a couple of brothers this afternoon, we were making the point that God uses him even when he knows he's being used, but even when he doesn't know he's being used, God is using him. And we're back at Job. We're back at Job. God blessed Job. Then the roof fell in. And Job said, well, you know, God gives and God takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. More trouble arrives, and he ends up saying, well, should we receive good at the hands of God and not calamity? This is all of what I'm now saying is in Job chapters 1 and 2. So, but prior to that, Job had been the greatest man of the East. He was doing okay till the preachers came along. And the preachers then explained to him what the trouble was. And that's when the trouble really started. Because for a while he was convinced that maybe what they were saying was true, that God was beating on him for his crimes. And you know the story of Job. He stood up and he told God. And sometimes he was rude and sometimes he was blasphemous. But he still hung on because he wanted the real God to step back into the throne again. Because the one that he was now hearing about wasn't one worth worshiping. And that's why God was pleased with the man. You remember at the end of the book? He says of Job that Job spoke right things about me. Is that the same Job that we were reading about in the book? Yes. Because the God that Job was attacking was a God who didn't exist. The God that Job wouldn't worship is a God who would prove faithless to people, who would be unrighteous, and Job wouldn't bear a God like that. And that's the one he was railing against. But of course he wasn't there. But Job thought, because the fellows had shut off their mouth, that this is how God was acting. And he was telling God essentially, you're not allowed to do this. You can't be unrighteous. You're God, for pity's sake. So, but before the roof fell in, chapters 29 through 31, Job describes his life in an oath of innocence. And the friends started telling him, oh, you're a bad news. You were hurting widows. You were hurting orphans. You were walking all over people. You were doing wicked things. They were saying all of that. And in chapters 29 through 31, Job said, that's not how I live my life at all. And very much like Paul in 2 Corinthians, he began to say how his life had been. And in the middle of it, he will say things like, I love the phrase. He said, I made widows' hearts sing. What do you mean by that? Well, you know what he meant by it. I'm just bringing it up just to make you react. Picture someone, their husband's dead, she's got a lot of kids around her, she's got a mortgage, the old-time mortgage. She had all of her debt, she needed to pay these kids, or needed to feed the children, didn't know what to do, and up the road comes this fella with a servant coming after him with a big cart full of goods. And he chats with her, and she's sobbing, and he puts his arm around her, and she's crying about the whole thing, and I've got some debts I need to pay and all that. And what's he saying? Well, don't you worry about it. I'll take care of all of that. And then he's telling the servants, fill her shelves up with that stuff. Put some more of that. Those kids have got big appetites. And so he does for her all these marvelous things. And when he leaves, his heart, her heart, is singing because he took some money. He took the blessings of God. He took some goods, and he passed it on to this lady. Job lay at night, not conscience smitten. Lying at night, says the scriptures, trying to figure out, what can I do good tomorrow? That's how he spent his nights in bed. And there's something fine about taking money, and I do mean money. And I've noticed we've been having little reports of it going on here. Lovely thing, this. There's something fine about taking money. And one more time, I do mean money. I don't mean just goodwill. I mean money, and putting it in the hands of someone who's in real need. George Gissing, about 100 years ago now, tells a story of him walking down the street one day. There's a little boy sitting on the sidewalk with his feet in the gutter, sobbing his heart out. What's the problem? Gissing said to the boy, 7 or 8-year-old, I can't remember. He said, what's the problem? And the boy sobbingly tells him that the mother sent him with a sixpence, a dime. Sent him with a sixpence to pay a debt, and he lost it. And Gissing says something like, sixpence lost, and the whole world turned wretched. He said, I put my hand in my pocket and worked 6 penny worth of miracle. Isn't that a lovely phrase? Now, I've done that, not very often, but I've done that. I've met up with some people who were in need, put my hand in my pocket and worked, 5 pounds worth of miracle. You've done that, haven't you? And isn't it a great feeling? Well, you shouldn't do it to get great feeling. I'm not talking about doing it to get great feeling. I'm talking about doing it and getting a great feeling. You think when Job walked away and that widow's heart was singing, you think he was mad? He loved it. And this man loved the Lord. And he loved the Lord when he was rich. He loved the Lord when he was prosperous. And he loved God by loving people. And he's got a phrase in there, he's a very wise man. I don't know how old he is, but he's much older than the young man, but he's not as old as the aged man, for he makes these 3 categories in 29 through 31. He says, when I would come, the young man would make an aisle, and I would walk through. And even the aged men, he said, would rise up. And he said there were those who, if I smiled at them, they could scarcely believe it. Isn't that a lovely thing to say? And you would think like he's bragging. He's nothing bragging about him. He's just making the point, look, I didn't live the way you guys said I lived. I wasn't beating anybody up. I wasn't mistreating anybody. I'm telling you, when I go down the street and I saw some people and I'd smile at them, they could hardly believe it, he said, that I smiled at them. See, I love that. You know who I really respect? I really respect Muhammad Ali for lots of reasons. But you know, Muhammad Ali, with his fight promoter one time, went to California, went to a woman's prison. And you think those women were excited? They were going out of their tree. And they had them all lined up. And Muhammad was going to go up and, shake hands with them all, and they couldn't believe this big, handsome, charismatic, famous man would bother with them. And the boxing promoter who was with him watched him. Every now and again, he'd lean over and he'd kiss one of these ladies on the cheek, and she would nearly faint, And some of them would use language we wouldn't dare use, but say, he kissed me. Can you believe it? He kissed me. And so when it was all over, the boxing promoter guy, whose name's gone from, he says to him, I noticed that every one of those women that you kissed was ugly. And Muhammad Ali says to them, yeah. He said, all those good-looking women, he said, they've been kissed over and over again. He said, but who's going to kiss those ugly women? He said, can you imagine how they would feel when I kissed them? How they would talk about it years afterward? How it would change their prison life? And he wasn't bragging a bit. Not a bit. He just recognized the place in which he was and had this influence and was using it to make people smile. See, I love that. And you who have you leaders, you who are acknowledged among people, you need to recognize this. Elvis Presley was talking to Muhammad Ali one time. Was that a phone or something? Anyway, whatever it was, all of a sudden I heard a noise there and I couldn't resist it. Anyway, Elvis Presley was talking to Muhammad Ali and was complaining about how the public were, just didn't give him a chance. And Ali said to him, you need to remember that just none of these people have ever met anybody famous. You need to be giving them some, uplift. Give them a break, he said. And he told Elvis Presley how his own father, Muhammad Ali's father, had taken him to a place in Kentucky, a tree. And the father said, see that tree? Joe Louis leaned up against that. Joe Louis, very famous heavyweight champion. And Muhammad Ali said, I looked at that tree and I thought of Joe Louis leaning up against that tree. And just the thought of him, went over and embraced the tree, loved the whole thing, just to be in touch with someone fine and upright and wonderful and caring. And that's what Job is like. So when we read about Job in the first couple of, and there's more, it was on, there's lots of good stuff. Somebody ought to write a book on Job 29 through 31 and talk about leadership from it. But he goes on and tells other good things. But that's the kind of person he is. So when you read the first two chapters, you're not even hearing the kind of man that Job is. In the first two chapters, it looks like he's a very formal religious man. He's not that at all. This is a deeply caring, compassionate, sensitive, upright man for God. And when the roof falls in on him, then you know why he's surprised. But here he is, this wonderful man, and the Satan appears in the presence of God, we're told in Job 1 and Job 2. And God said, where have you been? He's a message boy, that's what he is. And he's accountable to God, and God says, where have you been? And he said, I've been walking up and down the earth, you see. And God said, have you considered my servant Job? There's nobody like him in all the earth. And the Satan said, well, he may be all of that you say, but you bought him. You're the best meal ticket in the universe. It serves you for the wages. Now, you stretch forth your hand and take all that away, and it'll spit in your eye. The Satan didn't say, I'm going to take it off him. The Satan said, you put forth your hand. It's not up to the Satan to do this stuff. Now, when God ends up telling him, yeah, go do it, he's doing God's bidding, don't you see? It's got nothing to do with him. He's a message boy. But this is the work of God, you see. This man accuses Job of being a hireling. And there's a point to all of this, and we'll get to it in a minute. And you're doing very well. And I'm really grateful you're here. God richly bless you for being here. Monday night Bible study, what? So he says, Job's a hireling. You bought him. And the implication behind all of this is, God, you cannot be loved for who you are. You have to bribe people. They won't serve you because they've developed any kind of relationship and affection for you. You own them, for pity's sake. Stretch forth your hand and do this and he'll spit in your eye. God said, a hireling? You say he's a hireling? That's a lie. And God goes to Job's defense. See, this we need to get a hold of. It is God who empties Job of all that he possesses. The scriptures tell us this. It's the fire of Jehovah, says chapter 1, that burns up all his crops. It's you put forth your hand and take away from him, says the Satan. It is God who does it. And in chapter 42, as the book is ending, we're told that the rest of Job's family come to him. I'd read all the text, but the time is going by. You need to read this for yourself, right? In chapter 42, the rest of Job's family come by, and it says they comfort him concerning all the calamity that Jehovah brought upon him. And that's the narrator telling us the story. So, God empties this man. But not because he's mad at the man, and not because the man is bad. Job loses everything, not because he's bad, but because he's good. The devil says you can't trust him. He serves you because you bought him. Take away the wages and he'll spit in your eye. And God took away the wages, at least the first big chunk of it. And what did Job do? The Lord gives and the Lord takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. So the Satan comes back, chapter 2, says, well, yeah, where have you been? Up and down the earth. Have you considered my servant Job? And then he comes again, this business about all that a man has will he give for his own life, for himself, to save himself. Skin for skin. It's probably a trading expression. And the fellows are trading. One's got one skin, another's got the other. I don't know what skin we're talking about. There's a seal skin and there's a beaver skin. Hardly a beaver. But there's a seal skin and a beaver. He's got a lot of seal skins, so he wants a beaver skin. And he's got a lot of beaver skins, so he wants a seal skin. So they swap, skin for skin. In other words, what the guy doesn't want, he'll give away to get what he wants. So the point of the Satan, whatever the metaphor, the point of the Satan is hurt his body, hurt his flesh, do something to him like that, and he'll throw in the towel. But he's gone further now. He said, skin for skin, yea, all that a human has. It's not just Job, it's all of us. So in the story of Job, it isn't just Job who's being called into question. It's you. Do you hear me? It isn't just Job. It's you who are being called into question. The Satan said a human will give anything away to keep what it is that he prizes, and he doesn't prize you. She doesn't hold you dear. And God said, essentially, that's a slanderous lie. And he goes to Job's defense. How does he do it? He takes away everything the guy's got. That's how he defends him. What? That is defense? That's exactly what it is. And if Job had had a conversation with God later, not knowing what was going on, and God had said to him, after it was all over, Job, behind the scenes something was happening, and Job interrupted and said, you shouldn't have punished me. God would have said, but I didn't punish you. Well, you shouldn't have cursed me. And God would have said, but I didn't curse you, I blessed you. And Job would have said, you call this blessing? You attack my body. And God would say, it wasn't your body that was under attack. It was you. Your integrity. Your life. Your soul. Your character. And you say that's more important to you than anything. And Job says that throughout the book, is integrity. I won't give up. Not even if it means God falls out of heaven. I'm going to maintain my integrity. I'll never admit I did what was wrong. The devil said, take away what he's got and he'll spit in your eye. And God stripped the man. God chose to strip him of everything he had, and the only thing left was this piece of integrity, standing up, speaking against God. This wasn't a yes man. It wasn't a servant of God for bribes. This was someone who had had a relationship with God, now thought he had lost it, and was attacking God for God's lack of integrity. That's how much integrity the man had. But the one thing comes clear in Job, that Job served God not for the wages. And the Satan said, humans are like that. They serve for what they get out of God. And you do, don't you, of course? You know, you say, you sing hymns like, I want to go to heaven, it's going to be wonderful after a while. And that's the only reason you care for God, isn't it? I mean, so you're going to heaven. There's nothing about him that you like. There's nothing joyous about him. He doesn't have any warmth or goodness or uprightness. None of that cares. All you want is just to get to the streets of gold. Isn't that right? That's what the Satan said of you. That's what he was saying of Job. And God says, that's a rotten lie. And goes to Job's defense. And it's a peculiar way of defending him. Stripping him of everything. Because God believed in Job. The book of Job is not about where is God when the sore years come. The book of Job is about where are the humans when the sore years come. The Satan said, when the tough times come, the humans get out. God says, that's not true. That's not true. So what is it that's going on in Job? Job doesn't know it. But he's fighting God's battle for him against all the forces of darkness and wickedness and cynicism. Job, not knowing about the Satan, not knowing about God's wager, God was willing to bet on this little man that he would stand up in the middle of it all. And he did. Now, he had a big mouth, it's true, but he hung on just the same. And he wouldn't leave for pity's sake. And God was betting, God was wagering that there are humans, and this one in particular, that this one would stay true. And he did. Job, I love this phrase, it's from Henry McGuiggan. Job was fighting God's fight for him against all the forces of cynicism and darkness. And there are people who would say that Christians are Christians just so they can get to heaven. Oh, well, we're not going to argue about looking forward to heaven. Of course we do. Because heaven, among other things, heaven is not just a place, it's a state, but it's a place where a state of things exist. Heaven is the place where you're now sure that lovely friendships never end. That noble, honorable dreams are utterly fulfilled and will not fail. Then it's the final assurance. There's no more risk of missing it and losing it. When we get home, we're home permanently and well. And our friendships are forever settled. Ethel and I were having a Bible study one time in the house, and we came across this funny old passage that's in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. It's about those who attain to the age of the resurrection, those who attain to that age to come. It says, neither marry nor are given in marriage, but they're like the angels of God. Now, it's an innocent passage, and my view of it needs worked with, but it still looks the best to me anyway. The passage doesn't say that we cease being male and female. It doesn't say anything like that at all. There's nothing like that in it. Oh, I was going to say something that would lead me off on another track. It's really interesting. Humans are not male or female. Man is male and female, says the Scripture. Genesis, I shouldn't have started this. Genesis 5:2. And he called their name Adam. We are not without one another in the Lord. We're not. There is no man with a capital M without male and female. So we're going to be male and female when it's all over. And we're going to know each other. The very idea that we're not going to know each other, I find that just intolerable. We're going to know each other. And I'm going to know you. And Ethel and I were having this Bible study. And here's this passage that says, I'm off that other. This passage that says, they're neither married nor given in marriage. And I said, Ethel, that means that you won't be my wife anymore and I won't be your husband. And she didn't like a bit of that. I love her for it, too. She didn't like a bit of that. And the old lip started going. You know, Charles Kingsley came across that text. Charles Kingsley, English writer years ago, wrote Westward Ho. If you're familiar with that book, that's the writer. Anyway, he came across that text. He adored his wife, and she adored him. And he read that text, and he couldn't make anything of it. He didn't like it, but he didn't know what to do with it. He said, well, I don't know what that passage means, but it's got nothing to do with me and my wife. See? And I think God would have smiled at that. See, I think God would like that. Anyway, but he knew he couldn't handle the text any other way. So I tell my Ethel, that means we're not going to be husband and wife anymore. Well, she didn't like that a bit, you know. And she got all trembly and teary, you know. And I said to her, but wait a minute, don't panic. We're going to be friends forever. Now that helped her. And Ethel's got these tiny little hands, you know, about that size. Well, they're not that small, but they're wee tiny hands. And you know how your wife or your husband, they've got these things about them that really appeal to you. Well, it's my Ethel's hands. I don't know what it is about them, but all her vulnerability seems focused and centered in her hands. And sometimes when I'm not good to her and I make her cry, she doesn't want me to see her cry, so she puts her wee hands up and covers her eyes. And see, that unzips me. That just unzips me. Because as soon as I see that, I don't care who's right or wrong, who started it or didn't start it, that's it all over. That busts me wide open. So when I told her that we were going to be friends forever, she put her wee hands up and looked at me through her fingers and got all teary, and she said, Jim, is that true? I said, well, of course it's true. Oh, and she started crying softly, and I loved that. She just loved the notion that we were going to be friends forever. She said, are we going to know each other? I said, well, of course we're going to know each other. I want to know that you were the one I was married to, and you're going to know me, and we're going to know, well, of course we are. You think God's going to do a lobotomy on us or what? No, and heaven. And so we're not saying we don't want to go to heaven. That's my point. That's all that rambling was about. But since I was told you've got plenty of time, I thought I'd ramble a bit. But so we're not saying, and you came here and you asked for it, didn't you? But we're not saying to people we don't want to go to heaven. But of course we want to go to heaven. Not today. This is great here. I mean, I'm happy about it here. I'm not interested in going out just right now. Heaven's going to be there and it's not going to leave. And so when we get there, we're going to be there a long time. So I'm enjoying myself here. And none of us are running around with a gloom on their face saying, wish I were dead. You know, none of that. None of that. But we want to go to heaven, but we don't serve the sovereign Lord just to get to heaven. Maybe we did it first. Maybe God in the beginning was fire insurance, you know, where we didn't want to go to the other place. But we've outgrown all that. We met up with Jesus Christ, learned not only to worship and adore him, to like him. I like Christ, and so do you. He's the kind of person we'd say, John, this is Jesus. Lord, this is John, and let them get on with it, you know. We would be proud to have him around. We'd brag on him, for pity's sake. We've learned to love God because we've seen God in Jesus Christ. And our relationship with God is not based on what we're going to get. I know we've got our selfishnesses and all of that, but nevertheless, in our heart of hearts, even if we are selfish, we renounce it. We say, it's wrong. I don't want to be that way. I want to outgrow it. I want to love the Lord for the Lord. I want him to be my friend. I want to serve him because he's the kind of God he is. And if I don't feel like that, I want to feel like that. And so do you. So here's this Job. He's serving the Lord. And he's serving him well. And he loves the Lord. And he laments in chapter 29, I remember the days when God was my friend and he used to come into my tent like a friend and we talked together. He missed all of that. Now that section is an oath of innocence. I know it. It's a formal legal thing. But it's also a piece of nostalgia. He wishes he had the days back when God and he were close friends, don't you see? And so here he is now. He doesn't know what is going on. He doesn't know what God is up to. His friends have persuaded him, and he's been persuaded that God is beating on him for some wrong, some deep wrong that he's done, and he knows he hasn't done any of that. And so he's saying, I don't understand why you're doing this. But all the while he's holding on to the God he loves, even when he's doing it with this acerbic speech. And he doesn't know it, and God won't let him know it. It's important that God won't tell him. It's important that God won't tell him. In his ignorance, he fights God's battle for him. Now, God had walked up to him at the beginning of it all and said, Job, tell you what, I've got a job for you here. There's someone coming to me shortly, and he's going to say that you're a hireling and a self-serving hypocrite, and I'm going to take all this stuff from you just to show him that you can stand up. Well, of course the guy would have stood up. He would have said, I'm your man, I'll do it. But that wouldn't have been the story. That's not what God wants to get through. He doesn't tell Job. He will not let Job in on it. He depends on Job. He wagers on Job to hang in and do what is right without even knowing all the reasons. And does it make a difference that Job sitting on the ash heap maintains his integrity? Does it make a difference? Sure. Do you think it's important what you do with yours? Do you think it's important how you handle your business? How you live with one another as husband and wife? How you live with one another as children and parents? Do you think it matters how you behave yourself around the house and providing and doing? You think it's important to respect your parents? Do we think that we're fighting God's battle for him against all the forces of darkness and cynicism in the world? The book of Job makes it clear how we behave here, even in our ignorance, carrying our burdens, working with our bone-deep depression, being on our own, our business falling through, and living radiantly and uprightly. The scriptures make it clear, the book of Job in particular makes it clear, that doing that is of importance to God. That doing the job right, doing our work fine and well and honorably, standing up in the face of all of the trouble and the heartache, and not saying to God, give me this or I'll move away. Our refusal to leave, our doing what is right, our maintaining our integrity to the degree that he enables us, don't you understand? To maintain our integrity does something beyond the visible realm. What you see, I would love you to believe this. And if you're having difficulty believing it, work with it. Let the Spirit of the Lord take whatever truth I'm uttering and what you can read straight out of Job there, to just let it sink into your heart and come to believe. Allow yourself to believe that what you're doing makes a difference, has eternal consequences in realms beyond what you and I see. I know it must be difficult. I know it must be difficult for younger women who have 3 or 4 children and are at home working with them and doing all of this and trying to get things and thinking, I'm not doing anything for God. Don't believe that. Don't believe any of that. All of life is capable of being worship and service to God, and doing it all with integrity is the work of God, don't you see? And if we're able, and we are able, and we do it, and you know people who are doing it all the time, if we're able to serve God, to speak his name graciously, even when we're carrying things that people just think, how can he do that? How can she do that? We're doing something fine and wonderful for God. You know, we can brag on our teachers. We can brag on our shepherds. We can brag on our programmers and our educators. We can brag on our architects and all the rest of it. When people say, the Church of God, what does it produce? We can bring all of those people out and brag on them. But we brag our best when we bring out our wheelchairs and our sick beds and all these others and say, this is what we produce. People who serve the Lord here, in the middle of all of this. We take people up to the hospitals and show people who are lying awfully ill, but who serve the Lord even while they're there. We bring them across people, who just can't get over the pain and the loneliness that's in there, and they don't even know why. And yet, they serve the sovereign Lord. Those are the kinds of people we produce. We cultivate that, and out of the Church of God grows this kind of people. And these are a witness against the Satan and against the darkness in the world that would swallow people up, that you can live radiantly. You can live well under awful pressure. In a city, in this very state, some years ago, I was pushing Ethel through. Ethel's in a wheelchair. I wasn't just pushing her. I was pushing Ethel through a mall some distance from here. And she and I don't remember all the details, but we were heading, I think, for a checkout, what we thought was a checkout area. And we saw two women and a little boy from about here, maybe to the back of the hall. And, well, I recognized one as a woman, but the other one wasn't immediately recognizable as a woman. I knew it was a lady because she had a dress, you see. And it was a lady, but she looked just a bit strange the closer we got. She was the most deformed woman, facially, that I've ever seen in my life. I couldn't tell where anything was except her eyes. Bright, when I got up close, bright, shining eyes. I couldn't tell where her mouth was. Her face was just swollen. And all of the, the marks that differentiate your nose and your mouth, they didn't exist. And this one was one mass of flesh. Pushed the chair up, got close to it, saw all of what I just described, and she turned, looked at us full face. As it turned out, the other lady was her daughter, and the little boy was the grandchild. And we said hello. And Ethel's good at this. I'm not, but Ethel's good at it. We got to chat, and I said a few words, and then she said a few words, and then Ethel and her started bragging on grandkids, that sort of stuff. And I was looking too hard at the woman, so I couldn't trust myself, so I pretended something else had got my attention somewhere in the store, so I looked away till I could get a hold of myself. In the meantime, Ethel and her are blabbing away, oh yes, this is my chance, and there. I think, well, I was going to say something that would lead me to somewhere else, but we offered God's blessing on one another, and we left. And when we got out at the door, Ethel looked at me, I looked at her, and Ethel said, Jim, no more complaining. I said, okay. I don't know how people can bear that and be cheerful. Well, I do know, you know. God enables, of course. Of course. I don't care whether they're Christians or non-Christians. Anyone who behaves nobly, in the end, gets the strength from God. They don't get it from the other place. Anyone who speaks truth. Anyone who is kind. I don't care if they're Christian or not. Anyone who's noble and honorable and upright. They get their power from God, for pity's sake. And we ought not to be slow to say that. We ought to be thankful for it. God, the Spirit of God is at work in the world, changing people. I'm not saying they're all saved. If they don't come God's way, that's another issue. I'm saying that God is at work in their lives. And this lady is offering God's blessing on us, and we're offering God's blessing on her as we leave. Ethel says, no more complaining. I said, okay, no more complaining. And how they can do it, and how God can trust people to carry these kinds of burdens. How long did she have this? I don't know. How long is she going to have to put up with it? I don't know. Had it been me, with my inverted, bent, old, screwed up ego and insecurity, I never left the house. But here's this lady who's brave and courageous and honorable and comes out and lives her life. See, I think that's wonderful. And thanks God. And thanks us for it, saying, God bless you. And thinks God's wonderful. How did she do it? People can love the Lord without being bought. And that lady hadn't said to God, okay, I'll speak good in your name if you make me well or keep me well. That at all? And you're doing it. Some of you haven't had a hard time yet. I don't mean it to be funny or rude or anything else. Some of you have a good health in the day you were born, and God bless you. God bless you. You know where it came from, and you're thankful for it. And tough days are going to come. If Christ doesn't come soon, we're all going to go you know where. But so the hard times are coming, and we will live it then. Now, if cancer gets a hold of my liver tomorrow, we'll see if I'm going to live up to all this patter, won't we? But I will. And so will you. So we will. And in doing so, God who wagers on us, God who says, oh no, these aren't hirelings, they'll stick with me. God will be pleased for us, with us, for all of this. He will. And we're going to do it. In a minute or two, are we an invitation thing? Okay. Well, I don't know how to get from here to an invitation, but you know we're Christians here. We'd love you to be a Christian if you're not. And New Testament's awfully plain on how you become a Christian. Just step up to somebody or speak to the friend who brought you, and they'll show you the scriptures on how one becomes a Christian. It's awful plain. We'd love you to be a Christian. And if there's anything that you would, who are a brother or sister here, who thinks, well, I really feel the need for us to corporately pray, well, you know, come on up and do that. But if you can settle something where you are in the pew, no need for you to come up front. But I do think if the world needs anything, it needs the Church of God to teach it how to suffer. Now, chunks of the world are suffering so that to speak about it is obscene. The Sudanese people who are going through what they're going through now because of a bunch of idiots who won't let aid through or anything else, who are having a little warlord wars, this is obscene. And to walk up to people like that and to look at our troubles and say, well, I know what you mean. We don't know at all what they mean. We don't know. And to speak in their presence might well be obscene. Just because I've read Dickens doesn't mean I know about the poverty of people. Yeah. But for all that, having said that, and recognizing that we're not in the same boat as some sufferers, we all recognize that. I saw some of these warlord gangsters playing football with the skulls of the people that they killed and left lying and let the animals eat. God's going to right all wrongs. God is going to right all wrongs. And that means more than punishing the guilty. There's a passage in the Old Testament in Joel that says to the innocent in Israel, I will restore unto you the years that the caterpillar have eaten. What do you think that means? I think God is going to right all the wrongs and everything. I don't know how he's going to do it, but I know he will. For the judge of all the earth will do what is right. And it's not enough to punish Hitler. Not enough to punish Stalin or Pol Pot or Papa Doc or any of these guys. To right all wrongs is to deal with the innocent, to deal with the babies, to deal with whoever it is, to work it all out. And God's going to work it all out. In the meantime, we who do our suffering, we who have our pain, we who have our heartache, will not serve God on condition that he make everything right for us. We're going to get the job done one way or another. Now, we may go kicking and crying and screaming, but we'll go with him just the same. And we won't insist that God exempt us. And here's the last thing I'm going to say, and then what's the number? 862? 862. There's a movie called Glory. It's about a Robert Gould Shaw. The letters and all of that are in wherever the archives are in Washington, D.C., I guess. He was a young white gentleman whose father was a very wealthy and influential abolitionist. He was going to be made the colonel, the leader, the colonel of the first Afro-American division in the Northern Army, division, regiment, I don't know which is the word. But he has a friend. The friend is Thomas Searles. Thomas is a young black gentleman, and he's educated, and he's sweet-spirited, and he's noble, and he's all of those lovely things that you can think of, and he's the lifelong friend of Robert Gould Shaw. And when he hears that Robert Gould Shaw is to head up the first Afro-American regiment, he's the first volunteer. And he runs to his friend and says, I'm in, I hear you're going to do this, I'm your first man, you know. Ooh. And then a little while later, the young black men come from everywhere to join up and to be a part of this deal and to fight against something so ugly that every American is ashamed of the things that went on. Anyway, Thomas is now one of the enlisted, and his lifelong friend is now his superior officer. And Thomas thinks he can still be friend and fraternize at a friendly level, and the colonel keeps him at arm's length. And because they've been such close friends, and because they've cared so much for one another, Thomas can hardly believe this, and it's killing him. Oh, now, wait a minute. I know we're in the army is the idea, but, I mean, we were friends all of our lives. I mean, you can't push me off like that, you know, just because we're now in the army. But he was doing it. And there's a master sergeant, an Irish, of all things, an Irish master sergeant there who's one foul-mouthed idiot, and he's brutalizing Thomas. And in one scene, he hits him with a rifle butt, splits his eye, and Thomas then goes to his friend and says to the colonel, Robert, I would like to speak to you in private for a few moments, if I may. And the colonel, who knows what has happened, is dying, but cannot let the relationship be a friendship one.